There we go. Cool. What a wonderful turnout. Thanks everybody for making the time. It's great to see it. Just saying to Jamie now, maybe we need to have Jamie here more often to see such a strong attendance, which is great.
We're always happy to contribute.
We're also just commenting on how tanned you look. So I've been wondering if you've just been lying in the sun or like what you've been doing.
Yeah, mostly. Yeah. The sun's come out recently, so I've had a chance to enjoy the garden a bit. And as I was just saying to you, like the chemotherapy actually has an unusual effect of making your skin a little bit more sensitive. So show me the sun, this is what's going to happen. I'll probably get darker through the summer.
A lovely bit of glare. I love it. Awesome. Welcome everybody. It's great to have Jamie in the house. So to kind of set the context and a bit of background. So Jamie reached out to me a few weeks ago and he said to me, hey, I know that you are a big advocate of mental health. Obviously the work that I've done and we do with like Movember, which is obviously once a year, but obviously the theme of mental health is continuous, right, amongst all of us and people outside the organization too. And so he said to me, I'd love to share my story so far, my journey from that I'm going through. And obviously feeling very honored to be asked to do that, but equally just super thankful to Jamie for showing such levels of vulnerability and openness and willing to share. I'm mindful and we're mindful that obviously this is an incredibly sensitive topic. And I'm sure everybody in the room has either experienced or has family or friends who've been through something similar. And so obviously we are mindful of that. And I just sort of want to make you guys aware of the Modern Health app that we have available at the trade desk. Utilize it as has a number of great features, and it's a fantastic benefit from the trade desk. We want to make sure that the support is being provided to. Equally, there are going to be some pictures being shared. They are pretty real. Just being honest and open. And Jamie again being Jamie wants to share like the story and give you guys the context and sort of the story behind what he's going through and what's coming ahead of him as well, right? Because he's sort of in the middle of it as well, and he's in the mix. So. Yeah, join me guys in welcoming Jamie, our old friend, back to the trade desk.
Thanks, Vinay. That was incredible introduction. Oh my God, I'm amazed at this turnout as well. So thanks, guys.
Oh, it is. If you've ever sat here, it's quite daunting. There are 3 layers of people here. It's like a giant cake.
Sadly not, no.
Awesome. All right, let's kick this off and let's do this. Jamie, to start with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How long have you been at the trade desk for and what do you do at our company?
Yeah, sure. So I joined the trade desk for nearly 5 years ago now, actually. So we were back in Farringdon. When I first joined, there was probably less than 100 people in London, I think, at the time. And it's certainly a very different world now. But for the last 4 years, I joined, I guess, as a senior engineer, which was probably a little bit out of my depth at the time, because I spent like more than a decade before in sort of managerial positions in Barclays. So I kind of quickly sort of stepped out of that engineering detail business and into managing teams. And so the thing I'm most known for around here is looking after digital out of home. Which has gone from strength to strength. I know it's having its own challenges at the moment, but we've built a good product, I think. And I guess that's a little bit about my history. I looked after recruitment as well, which I guess is probably half the reason there's so many people in this room today, because I hired half of them. That's kind of where things kind of left off back in September, I think was when I was last in here.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Conscious, there's a bit of feedback there. So you're also a bit smelly as well. So.
Oh, wow.
Cool, let's dig into this, bud.
Yeah.
Let's dig into your journey. Obviously, your journey is very different. What you've experienced so far and previously and going ahead is obviously different to others. So let's maybe sort of like, how did it all begin? What are some of the things you felt? How did you pick this up? What were the steps taken?
Yeah, so I've turned the mic off. It's been a really strange kind of ride. So back in September last year, I started having pains in my abdomen. Again, I've not really had any sort of signs of anything before this point, just to keep in mind, and that's one of the things I want to be clear about with everyone today. There was no real signs of anything serious being wrong with me until this point in September when I started having pain in my abdomen. So I went to see the GP. GP initially prescribed laxatives, so I took those for a little while. We had a kind of a time limit set on that, but nothing changed. And then it was kind of shortly after that I noticed blood in my stools, and that is when you know that there's a real problem, and you should absolutely be going and getting something looked at that stage. And of course, at that stage, actually, you're really kind of a bit late as well. So at that stage, I got referred for a colonoscopy, had all of that done. And after that colonoscopy, the diagnosis was stage 4 bowel cancer, which is there's a very big kind of tumor causing a blockage in my gut. That's what's causing the pain. But actually, the worst of that is it's metastasized and sort of spread to the liver and other parts of my body. So at that point, they give you this message that the disease is incurable. And what they'll do is they'll look to manage it over a period of a few years, and that's the message that the doctors give you at that point. So that's kind of where it paused for a little while because the size of the tumor in my bowel was such that it can constrain their ability to kind of poke at it and get the biopsy stuff that they needed. So they weren't able to fully diagnose exactly what the flavor of the cancer was, so to speak, until later. So actually, I had Christmas without any treatment, which kind of left me free to kind of enjoy the pleasures of Christmas, which I did a bit too much, to be fair. But so then eventually, when they got this biopsy, when they figured out exactly what kind of treatment to give me, it was January before I started getting chemotherapy. And then I had a couple of cycles of chemotherapy. It would appear that had some good effects in that it was kind of starting to kill off the cancer cells. Unfortunately, what that meant is that it created a hole in my bowel because the cancer cells were being removed. And so so perforated bowel leads to effectively excrement being leaked into your abdomen, which is not a good place to be. So I ended up with peritonitis, and that meant sort of going into hospital within exquisite levels of pain. Like they ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your pain level? I said, well, my definition of 10 is somewhat different to what it was a week ago. So 10. So it was pretty bad. But then so that they kind of they had me on the operating table fairly quickly after some jiggery pokery, deciding whether or not I should have a CT scan. But they did get me onto the operating table within about, I think, 18 hours of it all starting. And I was on that table for 4.5 hours whilst they removed a large section of my bowel and cleaned up all the mess that was inside. So I had what's called 4-quadrant peritonitis, which meant there was a load of pus inside. And so they spent that 4.5 hours cleaning it all out. And actually what they do is they leave you kind of open for a period of like 48 hours, kind of fill in the gap with a bit of plastic. I'll show you that in a minute for fun. And then they leave it like that to sort of to make sure that they've kind of got it all out, basically. And then they sort of put you back under for another 4.5 hours and finish the job and sew you up and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was kind of the weekend from hell. But that's kind of where we got to, right? And that's kind of where we are now. I'm back to chemotherapy now, and which is a slightly different level of chemotherapy because after getting the biopsy from the cancer itself, it's actually shown to be quite an aggressive cancer, which means that they're going to give me more aggressive chemotherapy, which leads to a whole different route of treatment. And that's kind of the potted summary of what's happened in the last 6 months. So
yeah. I mean, physically, obviously, you're going through a lot at this point, right? Your body is being torn apart physically. Your mind equally is being challenged enormously, emotionally, going through all these ebbs and flows for this period, right? Obviously, Christmas was lovely from an emotional and physical perspective because you enjoyed that time with family. You were able to enjoy the fruits of your labor of Christmas, and all the nice things. But obviously, knowing in the back of your mind, you've been delivered some pretty powerful news. Like, I think I for myself, am often interested to know, how do you deal with news like that? If you've never received news like that in that sort of form before, how do you cope with that? How do you deal with it? What are the mechanisms that you've learned to sort of process that information?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a few notes here on this because it's something I had to kind of sit down and have a think about before we did this to make sure I'm giving people kind of a decent structured message here because, it's tough when you get given sort of difficult messages, whether it's, the loss of a family member, a friend, whether it's, your own kind of mortality being put on the table in front of you. You go through kind of an emotional process. And I'm sure people have heard about the 5 stages of grief. And, what I would say is that I've been through sort of challenging periods of grief in my life, like in the sort of 10 years of my career and losing close family members and close friends and things. And I've kind of got to know in those years what my grief process is, because it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own kind of way of dealing with things, and you kind of go through different phases of it. And I have my way of dealing with it. I understand that, and my understanding of it, I think, helps me in this situation because I can kind of recognize that, I'm feeling things that I can't control, and I kind of just have to find ways to rationalize and sort of be good to myself so that I'm able to kind of ride through it. Because the only way that you're going to get to the other side is to kind of start to accept what's in front of you, and to make the process of getting to that acceptance as easy as possible. And there's ways of doing that as well. And so for me, like when I get this kind of news, I go directly into kind of problem solving mode. Now, this is the polar opposite to my wife, by the way, so who has a tendency to go into, oh my God, everything's a disaster moment. And these things can clash. And that's another thing that we've learned in our time, like living together. Like we've been married for nearly 11 years. We both it took a while for us to recognize this in each other. And now that we do, we're better at supporting each other as we go through it. But yeah, my process is I go into the problem solving mode and try and understand the problem, try to fix the problem, and all the kind of emotions, they get boxed up until some point later when I actually get a chance to kind of sit down, process, rationalize. And that's where things get more difficult for me. But then for me to kind of deal with this kind of stuff is it comes from being able to rationalize. I have to find a way to kind of get beyond the immediate kind of shit, everything's a nightmare, everything's a problem, I don't know how to deal with this, to actually, there is a silver line, there are things that I can do and get focused on that. I think I said to you, like Vulcan-like logic is kind of what I do, what I kind of apply. I'm an engineer, that's what I do. So trying to get to the logic of it, trying to get beyond the emotional turmoil, and actually a little bit of faith, my own faith. I'm an atheist, but I have faith in what I believe in, and that also, that helps me to kind of rationalize everything as well.
I mean, I think you hit a really important point there, that grief and dealing with incidents in our lives, each of us has a different process. And I think you sort of highlighted there that what has worked for you is working for you may not necessarily work for others, but equally that process may change as you move forward with this as well. And how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, actually. I kind of rely on my ability to get back to rationalizing things. Like the last couple of days actually been quite difficult because like my wife's had her birthday and we've kind of been sort of out doing and stuff, and I kind of lost sight of myself for a little bit the last couple of days. And coming in today has been quite an emotional experience as well. Getting on the train, doing things I normally do for the first time in like 6 months is really, really strange. So yeah, I guess there'll be some sort of emotional rationalization to come later as well. So I don't know. I don't think I think the thing, my message would always be, you are not in control when it comes to this stuff. Like, your mind will overrule the logical part of your brain at some point, and you have to be prepared for that. And you have to know if there's levers and things to kind of improve on that. So the way the levers that have worked for me in the past and continue to work for me are staying active, be fit, be healthy, because that promotes endorphins and all the rest of it, and it starts to get you to see the positive side of things. Having a good diet actually really makes a massive difference as well, and yeah, and just avoiding things like alcohol, which everyone knows is effectively a depressive substance. So if you start taking those kind of steps, then you're kind of setting up your mind, putting it in a better place to kind of have that more positive outlook. And that's more or less as much as you can do. And the reality is you have to be understanding that time is really the one thing that's going to get you beyond the hard stuff and into a better place.
Amazing. I just think you going through that and identifying what works and what doesn't work and sort of putting those measures in place is, I guess, going through what you're going through is not easy, but I guess it helps, right? And that support as well. Like you mentioned, you obviously you're an engineer by trade. You obviously, you logic reigns rife in your mind, whereas as you mentioned, your wife is the opposite. Like how are you utilizing family and how are they coming into like supporting you during this time, both predominantly on the more emotional side, because obviously physically you're going through everything on your own. And I'm sure there's lots of times where you are sitting there by yourself, which we're going to touch on next around like sort of what's next.
Yeah. And I mean, family and friends and the trade desk, let's be honest. I mean, the generosity and support and everything it means so much. It's incredible. Like I'll show the photos of everything that the trade desk has given to me when we get to it. But yeah, having that support is so important. I think, one of my big tips for anyone that's going through a difficult emotional time is to talk to people, actually talk to the people closest to you, and they'll all be there for you. They'll help to kind of bring your mind back from that kind of precipice and back to a more positive place. Because people are generally rooting for the best, and they'll be looking for the positives as well, and they'll remind you of that. So yeah, the family's obviously there. I mean, I've had the busiest social calendar than I've ever had. Genuinely queues of people coming in and saying that they'd like to see me, and that's fantastic. And I mean, even if it's just a conversation, you don't talk about any of this real stuff. Like it's just knowing people are there that makes such a big difference. And yeah, and the family's been incredible. Yeah,
amazing, man. Oh well. We're just so pleased to have you here. Like, it's just great having you in.
It's great to be here.
I think you've got just the recognition of these people who are standing around you. I think you've got enormous amounts of support. So, like, we're thankful for you, mate. But obviously, the journey so far there's been a lot, right? Obviously, it's being diagnosed, it's coping with the news, it's going through a radical surgery. But what's next? You've mentioned obviously you've had like 2 rounds of chemo. So like from today onwards, how does it look like?
Lots more chemo, basically. Just keep dripping the chemo in, and then we hope for the best. We hope that it will have a good effect. I mean, look, one of the things I would want to kind of be clear about with people here is that my odds aren't good, right? That's the reality. And for me to kind of be able to say that and sit here and have this conversation with you all today, it's taken a lot of kind of getting my mind in the right place and accepting that is the case. But at the same time, knowing that there's this much probability that things won't go well, there is still a non-zero probability that it will go the way that I want it to, and sort of holding on to that is really important. So I sort of retain that positive mindset every day and just sort of remind myself, and when it does get a little bit darker, as it did maybe a bit yesterday, when it gets that little bit darker, you kind of have to reroute your mind to that positive place and remember that the chances are still there. And at the end of the day, statistics. There are damn lies in the statistics, and they are what they are. They're an aggregate, and they have an indication of what might happen, but they don't take into account lots of other external factors. So you have to kind of remind yourself of that on a daily basis, I think.
Sure. Looking at obviously our notes here, there's some things here it says obviously you're spending time in chemo, like when you're on your drip and you spend that time on your own. Like, what are some of the things that you enjoy doing while you're sitting there? Obviously there's only so much WhatsApp you can do. But have you read anything recently that's interesting, or like what are you doing to occupy your time while sitting there?
Funny enough, I say to people quite a lot, I say, what are we watching on TV? So I think I completed Netflix a long time ago. I'm not actually that fussy about TV anymore. I genuinely can't watch it anymore because it just annoys me. It's weird how when you've got nothing to do, how quickly your days fill up. I've got a family that got 2 young kids, and so they have to get to school and do their things. So I'm more involved in that than I otherwise would be. But yeah, and that many of you will know that I've been renovating my house over the last year or two. So there's still a lot to be done there. And I'm sure you, almost everyone here probably knows that the trade desk kindly furnished me with a set of decks that something I haven't done for maybe going on for 20 years. And so it's nice to have those in the house as well. So I actually have to actively carve out time to spend on them, which is weird. Like I never would have thought that, but yes, I fill my time with that. I try to avoid reading lots of stuff because the world's a pretty depressing place at the moment. So I like to do things that kind of keep me happy and keep, the things that, going to give me a positive return, basically.
So yeah. On a lighter note, you mentioned that you've clocked Netflix. I don't know if there was chilling involved as well, but the question on everybody's mind really is like, any recommendations for those of us that haven't clocked Netflix yet?
Genuinely, I don't know if I've got any recommendations. I think most of it's crap. I don't know. I went back to watching the old movies. Like I like my old Guy Ritchie movies. Yeah. So I've redone all of those. Funnily enough, there's a new Guy Ritchie movie on Prime that I watched yesterday that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah. I
can't even remember what it's called. Fortune something or other. That was quite good. I'd recommend that.
There we go, guys. So if you get bored, just don't watch Netflix. Go over to Amazon instead. There we go. So obviously we've talked about the news, we've talked about the physical, we've talked about the emotional, and we talked about how you've coped with it, right? Emotionally, how you channeling your mind through these different episodes, because it changed all the time. You said yesterday was a darker day, it was harder, and you've been through a lot. Like I think what we're interested to learn is like, how has this shaped your view on mental health? Because obviously, it's such a big topic, and all of us deal with it in such different ways. Yeah. Some of us, seek that comfort through exercise to navigate our challenges in our mind. Others, go the opposite direction, right? You mentioned earlier, like alcohol is one of those things where obviously we have a culture of going to the pub, right? You share your stories with friends, you communicate over a pint or a glass of wine or whatever. But as you know, like as mentioned, that is the quickest way to go into a slippery slope when you're dealing with some real heavy stuff. So I'm sure we're all keen to hear, like, how has it shaped your view of mental health, and what does it now mean to you in this journey? What more do you want to do to change the outlook of it?
Yeah, I think in the past I've been quite sort of, I don't know, arrogant about mental health. No, you sort of that confidence of youth when you haven't yet had any sort of serious life experiences. And I kind of. In my early years, I never really understood the notion of mental health because I kind of backed myself as being a very logical person in charge of my emotions. Like I can control this. It's not, it's not a big deal. Surely I can think my way through any problem. But it's so misguided, and I think a lot of people make this mistake. And I think I had various different experiences through my career and more recently as well. So like, you go back to my time at Barclays, I was pushed right to the very edge of my mental abilities through various circumstances at that company, which I won't go into, but I'm more than happy to discuss over a pint or something soft. But yeah, I was pushed right to the very limit, and I think that's kind of really what that point is when I kind of changed my views somewhat, because I started having sort of feelings and thoughts and things that I knew weren't rational, but I couldn't control. Mm-hmm. So it's a really weird thing. It's hard to explain to someone who's not been there, but you get there, and I've always referred to that moment in my career as being a moment where I kind of looked over the edge, saw what was there and took a step back from it, and that's kind of where I started to realize the things I spoke about before, doing exercise, alcohol, that kind of stuff. Kind of these things help you to take those steps, because that's the moment when you realize you're not in control. That's terrifying, genuinely scary, particularly for someone who believes totally in their ability to think through problems. So I had that experience. That was maybe, I guess, getting on for 10 years ago now. And that kind of shaped who I am today. And it kind of shapes my attitude in here at the trade desk. Anyone who knows me will know that quietly happy, not daunted by too much, generally quite confident. I know that if big things happen, big scary things, not to worry about it too much, and that all stems from that, is that moment when you realize you could find yourself in a bad spot. So yeah, I think again, for me, like then is when you realize what your kind of emotional process is. You start to observe rather than control. And that time is when I realized I was an observer, not a controller, and I was looking for ways to kind of just steer it, And since then, I've had other things. One of my closest friends and mentors took his own life just after a couple of years ago now, and that was an incredibly difficult time as well. So. Yeah, it's another one of those things. But that time was probably the first time that both me and my wife were conscious of each other's process, because we've lost family members over the years, and it ends up leading to conflict because as you say, she's having all the emotions in one go, mine are stored for later, and so we can't kind of connect at the right times. So actually, this more recent one, we both kind of figured out when to leave each other alone and when to kind of support, and that's incredibly important. That's another message I'd love for people to take away today: is recognize that everyone has different processes, and the people closest to you, you have to kind of fit in with theirs. I think those probably be the big things. I'm trying to think, I'm going to write anything else down today. Probably about it.
I think, you talked about that, and you're just saying now how you mentioned there your wife and you have very different ways of processing, and communication is such an effective way of dealing with grief, right? And talking about things, getting them off your chest. And I think this is a great time where I myself, I've had my own challenges and experiences where I've sought, professional help actually to navigate these things. And I think, sort of to remind everybody, I mentioned earlier, like we have fantastic benefits at Trade Desk. And, obviously we have a wonderful group of people here who come together that honestly we work very closely with. We spend so much time with each other at our offices, and sometimes the things that we're dealing with in life we can't necessarily talk to each other about, because it's whether you are comfortable sharing, right? Like today, obviously you've been incredibly vulnerable, and we're obviously going to get through some other things here as well. But I also just want to encourage everybody, we have the tools available, do use them. We're thankful that our leadership here and our team and the benefits team have created such fantastic opportunities for us to all go and engage with those tools. So let's make sure we do it, but equally reminding each other that, we're also here to help each other out. And I think, today is a great example of, we're here for you and we want to hear your story, but equally how then we can take lessons and learnings from this and help others. And I think naturally as humans, that's what we like to do. We want to help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to talk a little bit about the help available and how we're using some of this. So Vitality, the health insurance guys here, have been incredible at what they provide. I mean, there's an administrative organization, not so good, but nonetheless, the level of the help that I'm getting, like I've got a dietitian that I speak to every 2 weeks, and she kind of keeps me on the level with making sure I'm not being naughty and eating the massive bucket of sweets that we have in the house. And then we also have a company called Rennie Grove. Now they do hospice care in Bucks, and also kind of, they're like a Macmillan type people where they kind of provide support to families that are going through this. And this is not necessarily through the Trade Desk, but this is about accepting help from anywhere. And they were we referred to them through the NHS, and we've had a lovely chap come around, and he's spoken to Ollie, my eldest son, and Ollie was wonderfully nonchalant about everything. Like, his biggest interest was Avatar, The Way of Water, but nonetheless, this Rennie Grove chap has spoken to him, and he's going to have someone come into the school and be there for Ollie as he goes through his viewpoint on this journey. So so there is lots and lots of help out there, and just don't be too big to accept it. I would say.
Isn't. I think that was kind of the question, which we've sort of talked about already. But obviously, your wife is an adult; she's at a point where she's processing all this. But you obviously have two beautiful little boys. You're obviously at a different point, right? Like it's how do you explain that to your children? And obviously, how's that been? And
that's probably the thing that weighs most heaviest on my mind, to be quite honest. So. How are they going to deal with it? So my eldest is 6, nearly 7. My youngest is just 3. And the 6-year-old is kind of acutely aware of things now. He's very sharp. Of course, Christmas was like an absolute shit show for the family, right? So we had my diagnosis. My wife's father died suddenly, and my youngest broke his leg, which he's done a second time since then, funnily enough. It was a brutal time. Now, of course, this is very sort of like fresh in Ollie's mind. So when he's come out literally out of nowhere, and kids have this crazy thing going on in their mind. They've I think probably like a 3-minute time slots where they're thinking about one thing and they switch on to something else, right? And it's just madness. And then literally out of nowhere, he pops over and he says, "Mummy, I don't want Daddy to go to hospital and die like Granda did." And that's quite a tough thing to hear from your son, right? But the thing all we can say to him is that we're doing our best to make sure that that's not going to happen, right? I don't then quote the odds to him because that would be daft. But he's conscious of it, and he knows what could potentially happen. But at the same time, I'm incredibly proud of him for kind of just getting on with things. He doesn't weigh on his mind day to day. He sees if I'm tired, he comes over and spends time with me. It's kids are genuinely the most remarkable thing.
They are. Yeah. They also can be quite savages. They're brutal. They say what they see and they say what they think. So
I mean, if George could actually speak properly, God knows what he'd be saying. George would probably just soon walk up and punch me in the face. But he's the rugby player of the family. Like George is the more sensitive sort. So Ollie's the more sensitive. I can't get their names right. Ollie, he'll come give me a cuddle. George will walk up to me and say, "All right, come on, let's go do something." Something along those lines. Yeah.
Love it. That's amazing. And I think it's brilliant. You're looking at sources of inspiration, things to keep you going, right? Like this is because we talk about you have good days, you have bad days. You spend a lot of time on your own as well, right? You're in your thoughts. You're sitting there for several days at a time, hours at a time, having your chemo. There's a lot that you can quickly start seeping into, right? Google is a very dangerous thing when you've got time to look at things, right? So I'd love to, and we've got a couple of questions, then we'll get out to the audience if anybody else has questions. But I just want to understand, once you learned your diagnosis, because it's the same as all of us. Oh, my leg's sore, so let me check Google, and before you think you got to get your leg chopped off. Obviously pretty radical, but as you know, it can go down an enormously dark rabbit hole.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is incredibly dark, like where you go. And unfortunately, the way things have been for me actually is that rabbit hole is largely proven to be correct. Yes, it's a dangerous place to be. I actually actively manage my information consumption a bit on this topic, and this is kind of part of what led me into a bad place yesterday, because I started reading some stuff and it just sent me down the wrong path, and I regret doing it. But that it is so easy to do, and I would totally just recommend that people just, again, it's about being conscious about how much of this you want to take in and your ability to balance it. Because if you do go too far, it just sends you into a really awful place.
I mean, you kind of hit the nail there, right? Because it's a journey and because the process, there will be times where you are over consuming information that perhaps sets you back a few steps. But then, as you mentioned, you've got family and friends and that communication process, and also your children as sources of encouragement. I got to keep going, and maybe this is the time. Maybe let's have a look at some of the photos you've got, and let's walk through what's happening. There's obviously some really real photos here, obviously, and just letting people know. But equally, there's some really beautiful photos there too. And I think let's have a chat about those.
Sure. I mean, let's see. It works. So this is me high as a kite in ICU, I think, if I'm not mistaken, shortly after my first operation. So I'll come on to the next slide, which is where you see actually kind of this point I'm kind of open to the elements, if you like. But there's a lot of kind of weirdness in ICU, but you're wired up to all these machines. You're awake the whole time, really, because it's hard to sleep with all the noise and stuff in there. And as you can see, I've got a tube down my nose into my stomach because nothing can pass through at this point. Yet you still need to get nutrition. You can see in the top right, that little blue bag there is what's called TPN, which is like some highly nutritional stuff. god awful stuff, and they pump that into you by the gallon, but then so your body's processing that and still creating bile, which ends up sort of in your stomach. And as your stomach fills up, eventually you're going to vomit, and you don't want to vomit with all this open. So they put that tube down your throat, and then what they do is they drain it off occasionally. And what you have to do is make sure you remind the nurses to do it. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. But this is kind of the stuff, the kind of the more graphic stuff. So on the left there, I'm out of ICU. I think that's me on the ward. Maybe that is in ICU. I can't tell. But yeah, I mean, you get up and about quite quickly. I was actually, I think I was sort of moving around very, very quickly. I was only in hospital for like 6 days, which is beyond insane as I see it, because like to have that level of surgery and be out that quickly.
You went for a jog afterwards, huh? Just a quick mile.
Yeah, just a cheeky mile.
Just a cheeky mile.
Right,
on the block.
Genuinely, I was home straight onto the sofa. Didn't leave it for days, but no, really, genuinely, they do want you to be up and moving very, very quickly, because it's good for you to be moving around. That picture on the right is how I was for the 48 hours. You can see that's what is now my big scar, as you see in the bottom, in the middle. That they left it effectively open. I think I never asked a question, but there's like some kind of plastic that they've poured in there, and they put a drain in there, and then they leave you like that for 48 hours. But yeah, with all those lines into your arm and in your neck as well. So literally, I'm just like it's like something out of a movie. The number of tubes and bits and bobs that you get like wired into you. But then by the time you're all done it was on the Monday as it was, I'm all sewn up, and I've got the colostomy bag, which I still have today. Slightly more stylish one now though. And yeah, that enormous great big scar, which is still very much there, but no, it's a scar. There's no staples in it. I mean, a couple of months on, and I'm fully active and fully able to kind of get on with things. It is incredible, like what they do, and how you can kind of recover from it.
Plug to our doctors out there, hey, and surgeons. I mean,
Too right.
It is amazing, modern medicine today, hey?
It is absolutely incredible, and quite how they do it, the way that it's organized, that's a whole other story, which I would love to have with any of you over a beer as well. But quite how they manage to hold it all together in that environment is genuinely beyond belief. Yeah, I talk to a different consultant every day, and I think only maybe 40% of them actually had anything to do with my surgery. And on any given day, I was just shocked at it all. They basically live their lives by handwritten notes in a green folder. Incredible.
Amazing.
So I don't know what else I've got here. Yeah, so this is something else I wanted to kind of show. So that time in hospital, obviously you're not able to kind of eat and all that. So you can see me on the left there. That's kind of once I got home, immediately when I got home, and you can see the difference between that and me now. That's me on the right. That was my last round of chemo. I took a selfie chatting to Ali, I think it was, on Slack in the hospital. I took that selfie, and I put the two next to each other. I suddenly realized, geez, that's quite a big change. And so I lost like a stone, 6 kilos, 7 kilos, whatever your poison in terms of metrics is. But that lost so much weight in such a short period of time, 3 or 4 days that was. And that one on the left scares me today, like looking at how gaunt I am. But I've managed, through being a greedy bugger to kind of get back to a slightly more rotund looking face, which is a much better place for me to be going into chemotherapy. And this is something else I wanted to kind of call out today as well, because this is where I start to get teary, because this blew me away incredibly so, because I had no real expectations other than some well wishes from people, but to receive this level of love was beyond anything I could have hoped for. And the car, the decks, the bike, it all meant so much. So thank you. And I think so Callie asked me for something. How do I play this? Yeah, you may not be, the music may not be your taste, but yeah, this is me actually having a go with the decks. This is what happens. You see, I don't really
aggressive techno.
That kind of thing. But this is why I struggle to get time with the decks, because I generally have 2 little helpers. And they're not necessarily that helpful, but George loves it. apparently I can still do it. The unfortunate thing is you get to see the inside of my room, which is the dumping ground for everything as we go through the renovation. But so just a bit more on this as well. So if we go to the next one. So it wasn't just all the decks and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you can get the volume up a little bit on that, Kelly. But right, there we go. What did you say?
Thank you.
Good lads, thank you. So we even had some cash to splash out on the boys as well. So they were really grateful as well. So just thank you to everyone at TTD for that. It's genuinely, I'm absolutely blown away by it.
Amazing. Thanks, mate. Awesome. Let's get through a few more then. Yeah, I'd love to take it out to the crowd. But physically, how are you feeling today? Like, how you feel? Like, obviously, you've put on some weight. So
yeah, thank God.
Put on the calories.
Yeah, literally. So funny enough, like before I went into the surgery, they're telling me to eat a low fiber diet because what that does is it makes everything a bit softer. They might stand a chance of passing it through the constricted part of my bowel. So literally, I had to give up anything healthy. So just eating as much like crap as I could, avoid fruit, avoid veg. Fine. So I did that for a while. Now that that's gone, like I can eat whatever I like. So I'm still eating crap, just a little bit more veg because I need to put weight on. So my dietitian is saying, go for it. Protein, exercise, etc., etc. So I'm getting out, walking and doing as much exercise as I possibly can, and that's helping to convert all this crap that I'm eating into muscle mass as best I can.
Yep.
And so that kind of sets me up as in so that I can have as much kind of energy in reserve, if you like, for kind of the coming toils of the chemotherapy, which the chemotherapy will take its toll eventually. Mm-hmm. Right now, today, I'm fine. By all accounts, there's no substantial kind of sort of physical effects. I've got some weird neuropathy, which is tingly fingers, tingly lips today. Funnily enough, it's an odd one, but. Otherwise, I'm also a little bit more tired than I might be. I can't sort of go run a 5K as the way I might have done before. But yeah, I'm otherwise fine. Just getting on it. Yeah.
Well, you're looking great, mate. And
thanks.
Yeah, it's great. Just it's such a pleasure to have you. I know I've said that so many times, but just having. I was just thinking now when you said you joined 4 years ago, our engineering org obviously was quite small at that point. Now it's a lot bigger now, and you can see by the floor we're sitting on here. So. Just such a treat to have you. But I think, like closing up here, would love to hear your thoughts on, for others that are going through dealing with grief or like other mental health challenges, what are some of your sort of recommendations or thoughts around dealing with that and creating coping mechanisms that work for you? Because I think that is what's specific here. It's like what works for you may not work for me.
Yeah.
But like there are ideas in which they can start creating those for themselves.
Yeah, totally. I think I think you've touched on some of the key things here, and I've spoken a little bit about sort of the idea of grief as a process. Anyone who's done their Harvard business course, by the way, should know the value of good processes. But grief is very much a process that everyone has. It is personal. It's very specific, and what you have to do is kind of be conscious of it, realize you can't control it, and realize that everyone has their own different one, and just be aware. And I think as soon as you understand your own process, understand others' processes, you're in a better place to be able to kind of ride through it, because that is really all you can do is ride through and sort of create the best set of circumstances you can for it to be as smooth a ride as possible. So yeah, I would just be cognizant of that. And the big changes, as I've touched on already, is like get exercise, improve your diet, create those circumstances that are going to make it easier for you. The other thing is, again, we touched on it, talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people about your emotions. Like I said, my friend took his own life a couple of years ago. I had no inkling that was going to happen, none whatsoever. And we were really, really close to each other in Barclays. I saw him weather some of the most challenging work environments that you could possibly think of. And there's a few people, I'm looking at one of them, probably knows what that looks like. And then he moves to Amazon, and like out of nowhere, he's taken his own life, having his daughter had stage 4 cancer when she was 18 months old, and he raised £250,000 to take her to the States and have an operation that saved her life. So, and I would argue that the fact that I wasn't aware of this is a contributing factor to him actually finding himself in that position. So, you need to talk to people for your own benefit, and also for your own benefit emotionally and in your mind, but also to make sure that people are looking out for you. Like, because if you find it, he was one of the most emotionally rational people I would know. I never would have expected that to happen. So I can't stress how important it is to talk to other people about how you're feeling in this kind of situation. The other thing, so we've touched on this as we've gone through. So it's rationalizing. For me, this is probably more of a personal thing. I need to rationalize things. I need things to have structure. I need things to be logically sound, and it's quite hard to do when you're in a kind of an emotional quagmire. So you kind of got to ride it through and work hard to kind of rationalize those things and find the perspective, because it was kind of getting that Vulcan-like logic and relying on points of my own faith that kind of got me to the point that I'm comfortable with my own mortality, and I'm able to kind of focus now on making sure that my family's secure and in the event of my death, and that they're able to continue without me. And we also talk a lot at the trade desk, and we have spoken today about vulnerability and openness is related to talking to people. You need to be vulnerable, you need to be open. Bottling things up not going to do you any favors. So yeah, I would absolutely advocate that. And specific to cancer, not necessarily just mental health. I mean, my symptoms were not noticeable until it was too late, really, to be brutally honest. I think in terms of screening for things like bowel cancer, it doesn't happen automatically until you're 58. I'm 41, near enough. There's a famous lady who's been in the news up until last year, I think it was, Bowel Babe. She was 35. So it's being aware of things like this, and making sure you're sort of looking after yourself and having regular checks and things. I couldn't advocate for that strongly enough, because you catch these things early, they are treatable. Yeah.
I think the piece around like connecting with people and checking in, right? Like it ties back into sort of the piece around November, in particular from obviously this is quite directed at men, but we tend not to check in with our own selves and our feelings. We tend to block them out or put up a guard. And in that instance, checking with friends, but this is applicable to everybody, right? Like everybody's goes through grief at some stage, right? And checking with each other is just part of that process. But sometimes you don't need a reason. I think the thing I take from that is just checking in from time to time with your friends and family, and just dropping a message saying, hope you're well, like let's get a coffee, let's catch up, or whatever there may be, right? It's just that thoughtfulness that the person receiving that realizes, I am so important to somebody.
Yeah,
I'm here for a reason. And you just saying, I'm here for you, or I'm here for a chat, whatever it is, regardless of what you're going through, is that like drives that enthusiasm and encouragement for each other.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there was, I don't know, there was an advertising campaign a little while ago on TV where they said, ask twice, I think it was what they said. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to say, right, mate, how you doing? So I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. If you leave it there,
totally,
you haven't got through it.
100%.
Yeah, you ask a second time. And this is as from outsiders looking in on others. It is really important to make sure you're connecting with the people close to you, and supporting them through tough times. I hope he doesn't mind me saying, someone in this audience today that I was a bit concerned about through the pandemic, I sort of made sure that I was kind of sort of touching base occasionally and helping, just touching base, really, just connecting somewhere along the line to make sure that we're all kind of looking after each other. We're very close. So.
Amazing, mate. Cool. Let's mindful of the time, and I'm sure there's some questions on the floor. So let's just tie this up by saying, what's next, mate?
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think stay positive, and going through the motions. I think a lot of the engineers here will know me as being quite a positive kind of guy. I do like to keep in a positive mindset. And so it's kind of focusing on being in that positive mindset the whole time. Even if it means sometimes having to kind of pull myself back into things, but that takes quite a lot of active management. But yeah, I'll be sort of getting on with all my chemotherapy. So I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm moving around. I'm like, there's nothing stopping me from kind of getting on and enjoying things as much as I possibly can at the time, for the time being. So yeah, I mean, I've got a free hand to do stuff. The company's still paying me. Maybe I shouldn't say that too loud. But so I'm being well supported by everyone at TTD, including the finance department. I don't really have too much to worry about apart from my own health and making the most of things. As I say, part of staying positive is is realizing these kind of things, which again I've touched on. They talk about 5-year survival rates being low. The 5-year survival rate is an aggregate over the big population. I'm young, fit, healthy, so actually that survival rate, as quoted, should probably be a bit more positive for me. And 5-year survival rates are necessarily 5 years old. So in the last 5 years, cancer treatments come on a lot. So you don't know what's going to come around the corner. So these are the kind of things I kind of root my mind back to when I'm having difficult days. So yeah, it's just kind of staying positive, doing the chemotherapy, and just reminding myself of what there is to come back to.
Absolutely, I love that. I was just going to say, like in those tough days and thinking about what's next, like hopefully this is a great reminder to you that what you're coming back to and what you need to continue to fight towards, right? Not only obviously, for better word, family, right? Like this is your work vibes, and then you've got your personal family, right? And like there's obviously two loads of people who care about you and they want to see you succeed, man. And like you're absolutely right. Like you're young, you're healthy, you've got so much ahead of you. Like it's great to see that you're thinking about it like that. That you can overcome this, and regardless of what the odds there, let's take that out of the equation. It's all what's going on up in here, right? And it feels like you've conquered that, and you continue to conquer it.
It's an ongoing process. I don't think I would ever declare it done.
No,
but yeah, absolutely.
You conquer those chapters along the way, right?
Absolutely.
Like because it's a book, it's a story.
Yeah,
it's not like one long chapter. It's a book made of chapters that you're creating, and within those chapters there are stories that you conquer, and the stories that you go through are inspiring. And this is, we're so thankful to have you here. But I wanted to give anybody here a chance to ask any questions. I've obviously asked a lot today, and I'm sure maybe some of you have any questions for Jamie. So I'll hand it over to the floor. Do I need to bring them?
He's gonna come
I don't know
down.
what we're going to do to the top floor. Y'all are going to have to shout.
Just shout.
I've got a question for you related to something that you said closer to the end about screening. First, shameless plug. We have the ability to get screening from Vitality that is really good and relatively cheap. Please do it. Doesn't matter the age. Go and do it. So that's one. How did you feel when you realized that, if you had a screening 2 years ago, you would be in a better state? How did you deal with that?
You know what? I try not to think about that too much. I look back and actually I think, well, and you know what? I did have a change of bowel habit a couple of years ago, and that is one of the things you've got to look out for. But I jest, seriously, I jest not. I put it down to the fact that I ate too much curry. Yeah, I promise you that was, and it was. I only ever felt it after I'd had a good curry, and I was like, "Wow, okay, maybe I'm just getting a bit older." Yeah, at that point, yeah, there could have been a point that maybe I could have sort of stepped into this process and done something about it. But it's one of those things. It's best not to cry over spilt milk. I think sort of thinking about, okay, both my brothers have now had colonoscopies as well, because this can be a hereditary thing, and so there's some concern that they might have had it as well. Totally clear. I've got these little things called polyps all through my bowel, which are things that potentially can grow into cancer. They've got nothing, literally nothing. So it's easy to then think, well, what have I done with my lifestyle that's led to this? And if I start, that's another one of these rabbit holes that you can go down and start questioning yourself. And it's a really bad thing to do. So I just kind of throw it all to one side and focus on the future rather than, crying over what could have happened in the past.
Yeah. It's often with that, right? When you're in a situation, people say, "Oh, hindsight, right? What a wonderful thing to look back on." But in this instance, I mean, that means shit, really.
Yeah,
Because
what benefit is it going to give to you? Like,
totally. But
yeah.
like acknowledging that you cannot look back and think, well, 2-3 years ago, maybe if I did that, because your point earlier said, normally at 58, should you be going, as a male to go and have a look there and see what's going on? But equally, like that isn't the case here. So it's kind of, there's no way to look back in hindsight and comfort yourself, but instead you're looking forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, funny enough, I talk a little bit about my own faith being something that kind of helps me rationalize. So my kind of basic atheistic beliefs are that, when the lights go out, the lights go out. That's that, right? So I'm comforted by the notion that I won't spend an eternity in purgatory reflecting over my past mistakes. Genuinely, that does actually give me some kind of help. Everyone has their own faith, and I wouldn't discard any of them. They all address this problem in some fashion, and that's how I address it, through my own faith.
It's finding comfort, right? Like
absolutely,
that's what it's about. Any other questions? John, do you want a mic, or you can repeat? We go, take this one.
So a lot of people with cancer have a relationship with their cancer of some sort, be it it's adversary, or they're battling it, or they're being heroic about it. Do you ever feel, how does that feel to you? Like you're almost pressured to be a hero?
I don't know, man. I'd say the thing that I find the most annoying is when I talk to people who know what the situation is, and you get this look where their head tilts slightly to the side. There's that look of compassion on their face, and then you can feel them trying to like empathize with you, and that vexes me, because like I don't want to be looked at like that. I'm still Jamie, right? I'm still getting on with things. Nothing's really changed from that perspective. So I don't really try not to feel any pressure from the outside world on how I deal with it. At the end of the day, all these things are a personal thing. It's my choice how to kind of get things sorted in my mind and go through the motions as I am. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Sort of want to touch on that for a moment. Like, you meet someone, you tell them your position, the head tilt comes, and you start, fuck you, start coming, like, well, you don't know what I'm going through. But there's a lesson there in that. How do you almost want to share that this isn't a moment that I need your pity, but rather this is a moment where I can share encouragement?
Yeah. That's a really good question, actually. So I don't think I've answered that one sufficiently in my own kind of dealings with this. I guess what I try to do is just demonstrate that I'm still the same person, right? Nothing's changed. Like, you don't have to tiptoe around me. Like, you can have a conversation with me, and I'll probably be more forthcoming with these people with the information that I have. Like, I would flash out that slide deck and show them. Like, and then maybe in the hope that perhaps they might realize that you don't have to tiptoe or do any of this pity stuff, right? But that's the best I've got. I think, to be honest, the correct answer is probably just be straight with people.
Yeah.
But that's quite a difficult thing to do, particularly when you're kind of talking to so many people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's weird things, like, so this stoma here, I'm surprised it hasn't done it actually since I've been sitting here, but it farts uncontrollably, right? So I've often thought to myself, like, if and when I come back into the office, how do I address that going into a meeting room?
Yeah, sure.
I
mean, it's quite comical.
Yeah.
You shouldn't address it at all, and just let it
just let it happen. And the looks on people's faces.
Just see what.
Look, I had it in a restaurant the other day. I was standing up talking to the waitress, and literally, she didn't even avert her gaze. She dealt with it quite well. I didn't even
natural
touch
thing.
it. I just let it happen.
Society tells us we shouldn't be farting in front of each other, like loudly.
Yeah, exactly. And I have no control over it. So, yes, there's things that I don't have active control or active mechanisms for dealing with. I don't know what the answer is.
Look, they only raise that because I think it's sort of an element of being aware, right, and being self-aware, and like, on both sides of the spectrum. It's yourself putting yourself in their shoes and them putting themselves in your shoes, right? And that sort of, it's a very natural way of replying, especially if someone cares for another person so much, that like compassion and that feeling is just, it's it's heartbreaking, but equally like, and I think that's a good way to remind people, like when coming to you and others you're going through this, it's not about like asking the question to feel sorry, but it's more like, let's come together and drive encouragement, right? And that's kind of what is needed, because that's how you keep that momentum. That's how you keep your mental health in check.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'm mindful of the time, but I think we have time for maybe one more. If there's one more to go. No pressure. No worries, guys.
I'm going to be around all afternoon, and I'll probably have a drink in the bar a bit later. So, like, if anyone wants to chat about anything or dig deeper into anything, I'll be around. I'm more than happy to chat.
Just before we close out, Jamie, a big thank you, mate. Like, just firstly, like I said earlier, I feel super honored, and I'm so thankful that you asked me to do this. I know that, you know, coming together when we're going through it, you know, there were things you wanted to talk about. There was things that you wanted to share. And for that, we just are so thankful for your vulnerability, your openness, and willingness to do this, and willingness to share your story. And, you know, on behalf of myself and the rest of us here and the rest of the company globally, like, we wish you all the best, mates. We love you, and we think of you and your family, mate.
Thank you so much. And genuinely, it's been a pleasure. I'm more than happy to come and share.